Okay, welcome, Marty. You're the only one signed on outside. I'd like to open this meeting, regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Tuesday, May 16th, 2023 at 7 p.m. We begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There's nobody here to do public comments. So I'll move straight to correspondence. We did get an email from Brad Colts regarding the Community Gazette. I think each of us have this. It's really in reference to the letter we received from Matt Knickerbocker regarding the paper being left at the transfer station. And we have sent that in the last meeting. We voted to send that to the Ethics Commission for an advisory opinion. I'm not going to read through, it's a very lengthy email, but
And Marty copied this.
I believe Marty should have the email, is that correct? Yeah. And the folks at the Ethics Commission have it as well. Any questions or issues with correspondence? Move to the first Selectmen's report. There are a couple of I'd say kind of significant issues we're working on right now. The first of which is 77 South Street. As you know, it's the Voggy building. We're working with the state DOT and the owners of the building to see if we can have whether it's a lease or easement or something along the railroad track in a way that will connect South Street to Elizabeth Street. It's probably going to be about a 14-foot wide easement at the end of the day, maybe 10, 14 feet. That's kind of it's a big project to work with the developer. I think one of the challenges we're having is making sure that we can establish that it's a public right of way and not get ourselves into something that's, you know, too long lasting with maintenance or anything like that. We've been working with Marty, making sure that the language works. And do you have any thoughts or questions of what you know?
Well, it's just Marty, we had worked on something with one of the previous owners on that. Did that never got finally approved?
No, I think it's the same one, Rich. I think it was about, that's how long ago it's been. It's been over a year and a half.
Oh, yeah. But it's probably-
Where the Board of Selectmen went ahead and approved the license, lease, they called it a lease agreement, it ended up being a license.
Yeah.
And everything's been turned around. The state, I mean, I know Dan can explain it better, but the state, I think one of the problems is the state came back and said that they would prefer just to have the license agreement directly with the owner, the abutting owner, which is not the town of Bethel. So Dan is trying to work something out. I think we all are trying to work something out where we can end up with the sidewalk.
Right.
Yeah.
To the other.
The rub is that when the state figured out that there was no, so the building comes right up to the property line. And they figured that there was no town property between that property line and where their property began. They decided instead of making us the lessor or agreement or whatever we're going to do, they'll do it directly with the owner. The problem is that right of way has to be a legal public way. Right, for a number of reasons, not only for us to be able to use it, because they don't normally go to like subleasees and all that. But for the builder to do what the builder wants to do with that property, they have to have that be a legal right of way. Otherwise, the builder can't put windows on that side of the building. We'll have to relocate all the bedrooms and totally redesign the building. That's the jam that they're in. So if we're able to either get it as an easement or us lease it and do a maintenance agreement, I think it would be great.
I'm all for it.
But the state, you know, the state, what's the problem is our folks have been dealing directly with the owner, and the owner has been talking to the state, and it's kind of like a game of tin.
Right.
And now that these guys are really, they need this done like tomorrow, we needed to go back to where there's a reasonable agreement that Marty can approve that we have the control over it. It's illegal right or legal public. So that's what we're working.
Okay. Great. I thought there was, you know, I thought we were further along on that because that had been brought up years ago.
Yeah.
And just my concern is to make sure that, you know, they provide a fence.
Yes.
So people don't wander
Yeah.
into the river.
They're working on a fence and they're working on lights
Okay.
as well.
Great.
But I wanted to bring that up because it's a big issue and everybody's probably wondering why this is taking so long. So I thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah.
I'll throw another issue that is going to kind of be in the public. I don't know that Bethel will have much of it, but we were approached this morning by a Bethel resident. And her mother had passed away 2 weeks ago. She's unable to have her mother buried in one of the Brookfield cemeteries. I don't know if you saw on the news, 2 cemeteries in Brookfield, which were under governance of an association, have somewhat become abandoned because the last association member resigned. And there's been an issue since December where at least 4 families or so have not been able to have their loved ones buried in the cemetery. They're actually all on ice since, December, or whatever that is. So it may come up in the news around here because, we're trying to go to bat for our resident. Everybody has punted so far and not gotten involved. The Attorney General, I guess is looking at it, has said, they'll help the town try to reconstitute the association, but without any bylaws. And the person who was with the association hired a lawyer and is suing the association. There's a whole drama up there. So it may come up and, a Bethel resident is involved. So I just want to let you guys know. The other thing is, I'll be getting the EMS commission back together. They haven't met in quite a long time. So I guess what we'll try to do at some point is do a joint meeting. So that way we can all be there in the discussion and have a legal way to do it, not forming a quorum or anything like that. So more to follow on that. We're looking at the way we do the paramedic services. We've had a number of meetings just with stakeholders to kind of get things going. We're going to get some pricing and things, but then I think now we're to the point where I'd really like both of your experience and all of us to be together on this. So more to follow on that. So those are the big things. I'll move on to a motion to accept the Board of Selectmen regular meeting minutes from May 2nd, 2023.
So, second.
Awesome. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. I'd like a motion to accept the tax refund amount of $1,133.86, which are a result of overpayment of taxes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The last item on our agenda is consideration of the Board of Finance's request from the May 9th meeting. So I'd like to have a motion to open that for discussion.
So move. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so for discussion, I guess what had happened was there was some confusion about how the tax stabilization fund was supposed to work. I think part of this was a miscommunication when the comptroller was asking our town attorney about what that fund could be used for. I think he'd asked something to the effect, can we use it for anything we want? And I think that came back obviously no, because if we were using it to purchase something, then we would have to go back and actually have a town vote on that for our charter. There'd be a conflict. And in a moment, I'll ask our town attorney to chime in. The way I read this in light of our conversations after that, the tax stabilization fund allows the transfer to the general fund. It's not, and it affects the fund balance, but it's not having us spend any new money on something which would require a vote or a referendum. Marty, am I saying that correctly? Like if we read it the way it was written and we ask it the right way?
Yes, I think part of the problem was the way the questions were being asked. I mean, and one of my big things is the tax stabilization fund is an ordinance. It can't overrule the charter. So what happens is if and I'm just presupposing, if the Board of Finance decided that they wanted to spend another $100,000 on something else, all right, and I'm not talking about to keep the tax rate low or anything like that. I'm talking about a new purchase for something. They couldn't use that funds. Those funds can't be used because that's not what it was set up for. And the townspeople have the right to vote on it and have, a town meeting or what have you. But for the purpose it was designed, yeah, I mean, and I think if you read it, the ordinance said during the annual budget time period, they can use it to make a transfer to keep the tax rate down. So in other words, if they've got an extra $200,000 and they don't want to raise the taxes or the mill rate while they're discussing it, they can go ahead and transfer those monies. That they can do. But other than that.
So basically,
Purpose
as
of
the
it.
ordinance is written, as long as they stick to that, they can, we don't have to change anything. We don't have to go back to vote. Like I think we're solid. There was a lot of confusion at the last Board of Finance meeting about that, which is why they kicked it over to us. And subsequently, you know, I've had conversations with Marty and I'm speaking with all of us here. So I don't know that there's any action we have to take. I think it was just a discussion at this point. I mean, any questions from?
Should Marty be in on Board of Finance meeting to explain it to them also, or?
I think this just wasn't, yeah, maybe the next one, maybe Marty, you could attend the next Board of Finance meeting.
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, because I think it was a little game of tin can, right? I think Brad had asked the question and. Yeah, so I think if you're there, maybe that would be very helpful for them.
Marty, but this needs to be decided in February or March when they're drafting the budget.
Yes.
Well, I would say that it would continue up until the point where they set the mill rate.
So, and just so I understand this correctly, we're saying that they could take money from the general fund and move it over to basically stabilize the mill rate. Correct?
Yes, yeah, pretty, I mean,
Because we wouldn't have 200,000 left over in the middle of February because the budget ends in July, so we have no idea. See, I guess I was mistaken. I thought the whole purpose of this fund was at the end of the budget season, and when we were discussing it, if they had 1.2 million that they were going to transfer into the general fund, they could use it, part of it, to fund this tax stabilization fund. And I thought it was never supposed to exceed 500,000. Now maybe I'm confused, but I thought the fund itself wasn't supposed to exceed 500,000. And that's why at the end of the year, they could transfer money into it and have it in case they needed it.
they can.
Right.
If you read 9834, it says in coordination with the town's fund balance or policy, the tax stabilization fund may be funded when possible by the Board of Finance from the fund balance after the completion of a fiscal year. But I think the question that was kind of raised to me was, well, what can we use this money for? And I mean, and what I basically said was, you know, if you're going to use it for expenditures that will require a town meeting pursuant to our charter, then you still got to follow through with the charter. But if you're just going to make the transfer, or if you'll see, it talks about what the purpose is. And the purpose was to prevent a reduction in services or increase in taxes. So be the mill rate, you know, they could move some money over to the mill rate to keep the mill rate down. And I also think that maybe if there's some budget monies that have run out, I mean, under certain circumstances, they might be able to use that to swing monies over. But I'm having a hard time trying to figure what those circumstances could be where you could claim that it's not an increase in a budget item.
My thought of it was that they were trying to prevent spikes in the tax years, so they were going to use this fund balance to help stabilize the taxes over a period of time, so you didn't have an up and down. You had more of a incline or decline.
Yeah, I think that says that, Rich.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Let me weigh in from my side, because the way I read it and understand it is that at the end of a fiscal year, the Board of Finance can elect to take some fund balance, put it aside in the tax stabilization fund for future years. In a future year, during the design of a budget, they can bring money up to 500,000 into that budget year as revenue. And so because it's going to be voted on with a budget at that point, then the expenditures will have been approved by the budget, right? It's revenue.
But I don't think,
Right.
I don't think the balance in that fund could exceed 500,000.
Well, that doesn't say anything, but that would probably be up to our
No,
fund
it
balance
just-
policy, right?
It just talks about the $500,000, just talks about the annual transfer shall be $500,000. It says the maximum annual transfer in any one fiscal year can be $500,000. That's it. So if you try to, in 1 year, to try to move over 2 million, you can't do that.
Right.
But there's nothing in here that I read that says there's a limitation on how much you can move over to keep the mill rate down during the budget process, towards the end of the budget process. So if $2 million in there and you want to keep it down, I don't see any reason why you could.
Just if you have a poor tax collection year the following year or
Right.
something happens, you've created quite a gap in your budget.
Right.
You know,
Or,
this is like a very, you have to be very careful. And I mean, it's a Board of Finance possibility, but that's why I thought we capped the whole balance of it to be
Yeah.
no more than 500, because think about it, I mean, you could create a war chest every year, move 500,000 in there and you know, you're sitting on 4 million in the account, but you can only use 500,000 of it.
no, that's
Part
not
of
what it
this talk-
says though, Brian. I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying, but it's not.
I
what-
mean, again, it's a maximum, annual transfer. of
Well, no,
$500,000.
but what I'm saying is it's annual transfer, so there's not an actual account. Marty, where you have 500,000 sitting in, and let's say they didn't use it. Next year, could they put another 500,000 in that account and then you have $1 million in the account?
Yes, based on this, yeah.
There's no limit.
I mean, I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty slim. I think, you know, I foresee what this is. What might happen is all of a sudden we've got a large expenditure that's in the budget that was unanticipated or something that really gonna spike the mill rate. So then they're gonna pull it back out and try to keep the mill rate steady, so the people don't get whacked. I mean, that's my opinion. That's what I thought it was always supposed to be for.
And to Brian's point, you would have to do that judiciously, otherwise you create a
Yes.
huge hole.
Of course,
And now there's also talk about having a tax stabilization policy. That was supposed to be authored by the Board of Finance, correct? The actual policy part?
well, we have a fund balance unassigned policy. It's not exactly the same as the tax stabilization fund. So
Okay.
if you read the ordinance makes a distinction between them. I think where's it talk about?
It's 9834.
Right, it says the fund balance is unassigned.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. But yeah, they did pass one. They passed it. I think it was passed on July 12th, 2022. The purpose of the fund balance, et cetera.
Are they proposing to take another 500,000 this year and put it in the fund now?
No,
Nothing's been done with it. I think it was just, I don't know how I think it just came up in discussion, and then they figured out that they may need to change it.
and I don't think there's any action they have to take on it. It's just a matter of.
Maybe we just have Marty.
It wouldn't be
Explain to
difficult.
Maybe you should just explain it to
Yeah.
them, Marty, so they understand what it is.
Yeah, I will. I think, like I said, I'm not, this has come up twice now. Both times I haven't been asked to go to the meetings or issue anything. I got a phone call from Brad right before the meetings. And I mean, he made it sound like, and maybe I misunderstood, but he made it sound like, what can they spend this money on? You know, and I told him, I said, you can't just spend it on anything you want. It still has to fit within the guidelines of the charter. You know, so like I said, if something new can't be done.
So Marty, this would be used like if we had a major infrastructure problem. You know, let's say an unexpected flood where we're not getting reimbursement and we lose a huge section of road or something like that. They can use it to offset the impact to the taxpayers. Is that what this would be used for?
No, if it was put in the budget, let's say what happens is during the budget year, we have a problem with the road and it's gonna cost $4 million just to fix the road.
Yeah.
Yes, then I think what they could do is they could use that money and put it and keep the mill rate down and use that as revenue to help cover some of that cost. But it's supposed to be during the budget year. It's not to be any time during the year. Other than at the end of the year, they can transfer money into that account, into the tax stabilization fund account.
Well, I think that also the big part of it under the purpose is if we have a really bad year where our revenues are down, and then so we're walking out of a bad year with a hole into the next year, then
Right.
instead of raising taxes in a bad year, hopefully have a little bit set aside that fills the hole.
That feels.
Yeah,
It's still, the following year, we have to figure out what to do with it. I think it's less about what we spend it on, but more about filling the hole from our revenue.
Right, I think you're right. I think we're all saying the same thing. We're just
Yeah.
different types of sentences, that's all.
So I don't think there's anything to consider or act on. Any questions? Are we
No, I think we.
needed to that? Okay, so with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor? Aye. Both none, but. And we are adjourned. Thanks, Marty.
Okay, thank you.